The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ralph Tycho with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and it's my privilege to introduce another episode of God's Miracle with Randy Lerch.
Thank you, Ralph. This is Randy Lerch, and welcome to my show, God's Miracle. I call the show God's Miracle because after years of drug and alcohol abuse and being diagnosed with cirrhosis, God has given me a second chance in life to write a book called God in the Bullpen and be able to have this podcast thanks to Ralph Tycho. My special guest today is psychologist, author, columnist, and my friend, Jim Karustis. He has been a psychologist for 30 years. He was part of the faculty of the University of Pennsylvania, which is also part of the renowned Chidrens Hospital of Philadephia. Jim and I got to know each other after he read my book, God in the Bullpen, and by us contacting each other through Facebook. Welcome to the show, Dr. Jim. It's my honor to have you here today, my friend.
Thank you, Brother Randy. I'm very happy to be on the show. And thank you for your kind words, too.
Well, thank you, buddy. Hey, I was wondering, just to get things started off here, could you tell our listeners, about yourself and how you became to be a psychologist?
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, about myself. I'm a fellow thick-skulled human being who learns very slowly and usually the hard way. A child of God just like you. And so to me, like the name of your podcast, God's Miracle, is especially intriguing to me. I think about that all the time. I mean, it's just a miracle we got here in the first place. It's a miracle we're still here. I see it all the time. So anyway, Randy, how did I get to be a psychologist? Gosh, I'll have to condense that one. It was a roundabout route, I'll tell you that. I graduated from St. Joe's University in Philadelphia, and I think I'm still the only person to ever graduate from there with a double major in food marketing and philosophy. How's that for a combination?
Wow.
Yeah. I had nobody paying for college, so I heard St. Joe's had a lot of food marketing scholarship money, so I thought, well, what the heck, I'll major in that. But nothing against the food marketing industry. We all rely on it, but it really wasn't my thing. So I picked up a second major in philosophy. And you can imagine what I used to hear about that. Oh, you're never going to get a job in that, et cetera. But that was one of the greatest decisions I ever made in a rare moment of maturity, Randy. I learned how to rigorously think. I learned how to write, and it got me thinking probably for the first time in my life about, bigger issues. Who are we? What are we doing here? How should we live? So anyway, when I finished college, I still didn't know what I wanted to do, Randy, although I had done pretty well in college. So I was awarded a fellowship from the Rotary Foundation to go to India for a year. So I did that. And it was fabulous, and India was a lot different in 1985 than it is now, and it changed me in a lot of ways. I was very young, very naive. I got back from India, guess what? I still didn't know what I wanted to do. But I had a lot of experiences. I was more or less fluent in Hindi, one of the main languages over there. Well, what am I going to do with that in the United States, right? So I pursued some more studies in philosophy at University of Pennsylvania, and they made me a teacher's assistant for a class called Religion and Psychology. And finally, I'm about to get married at this point in the late 80s. Finally, I thought, you know what, that's what I want to do. It's psychology, human behavior. And I think maybe, just maybe, I have a knack for it. And so I got my PhD from Bryn Mawr College. And ever since then, I've been a practicing psychologist. As you mentioned, I was on the faculty at University of Pennsylvania Medical School, and as part of that, Chidrens Hospital of Pennsylvania through most of the 1990s. And since then, I've had a private practice. Since leaving there, I've had a private practice in Downingtown, Pennsylvania.
Wow, I'll tell you what, what a career. Obviously, the questions, if I've got a baseball player or pitcher on or something that I knew something about, I could ask questions that I had an idea, but this is, I'm asking questions. So if I ask a question, it sounds a little weird, just correct me. But I was wondering, as a psychologist, do you specialize in anything? I mean, do you go to, is there different fields, or you're a psychologist? If you did specialize, what was that?
Well, that's an excellent question, Randy, and I will answer that. About baseball, darn it, I thought you were having me on the show to talk about my Little League career, but all right, I'll talk some more about psychology, darn it. I had one good year, by the way, 1974. Okay, so yeah, oh gosh, there are so many psychologists and all types of psychologists. I love what I do, but I've been doing it so long. I often get contacted by young people thinking about going into the field, and to me, I consider that a sacred trust to try to talk with them. It's not as easy as some people think. The practice of psychology is not just about giving advice and sharing wisdom or whatever, although there is some of that. So yes, when I had left Chidrens Hospital, I had already published and co-authored many articles and some books regarding attention deficit disorder. So I was sort of known for that. And the clinic I worked at focused on that. I know you and I talked about this a little bit before, but more pertinent to the theme of your show, I'd like to say a few words in a minute about why I left there and what I'm doing now. It was dissatisfying to me to sort of be pigeonholed as a psychologist who works with children or specialist in ADHD. It's always been important to me to look at people as whole people, strengths, weaknesses. I see a value in a diagnosis, whether it's ADHD or depression, etc., but I don't get too hung up on it. And so at this point, okay, I'm fast forwarding to now. I have clients, honest to goodness, from 3 years old to 80.
Well, I'll tell you,
all kinds of issues.
Yeah, that is such a great service. I hear about the ADHD and that's if you can catch this situation or the illness, for a better word that I don't know, it's all better. It's a lot better to catch it at an early age, correct?
Absolutely. Listen, I think you know a lot more about some of these things than you realize. ADHD is one of those diagnoses where the old saying, a little knowledge is dangerous, really comes into play. Because most people in this country by now have heard of it, and the misconceptions about it proliferate. And very few syndromes have been studied as extensively and for as long as ADHD has. But one thing we can say absolutely for sure at this point is that the earlier in life you catch it and treat it, the better the outcome is. So, you got a strike on that one, Randy.
Okay, I got two more, buddy. But you know what? A couple of times you mentioned that you left Chidrens Hospital, but you never had a chance yet to tell me what made you decide to leave Chidrens Hospital and go into private practice. What did and what made your decision for you, buddy?
Well, that was one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make, Randy. I was a fair-haired lad at the time. I was moving up, publishing, blah, 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 had a good reputation. Had a faculty position at an Ivy League institution, of course, is considered prestigious. And I really, I loved my colleagues and the staff and everything like that. But that was around the time in the late 90s where I also became a parent. My first daughter was born. And, to be a faculty member, in academia and to see patients at the same time, that had me stretched very thin. And if there's one thing that I really wanted to do when I became a parent was be there and not be stressed all the time when I was there. And so I was in the midst of writing a book with a few other people, and I said to my wife, Cindy, I'm thinking about maybe resigning when we finish the book. And she said to me, and for once I listened to her because she's very wise, she said, how about if you resign now and still finish the book? And that's what I did. And that was contrary to advice from other people. Oh, my gosh, you're giving up a good position, stable position. But I didn't feel like I was particularly good at any of it by that point because I was stretched so thin. So I did a lot of praying with Cindy about it. I asked for guidance. I figured, all right, God, if this is what you want me to do, then I'll put myself in your hands. Try to make this work, and I'll do my best to serve your creation and do your will. And if it's not meant to be, then I'll find something else to do. I still feel that way, by the way. I joke, but it's only a half joke that, all right, I've been in the field 30 years. If this psychology thing doesn't work out, well, I'll go back and be a cook, or I'll sell books. I probably can't be a male model anymore, but I'll figure something to do. I'm not just to have a career.
At least you said anymore, You're a legend in your own mind, buddy, just like me. But, hey, you weren't just an author, though. I mean, did you have a column? I mean, you had a column in this paper. What was it? Ask Dr. Jim, or tell me a little bit about that.
Well, if you follow any of my posts on Facebook, it's pretty obvious I'm a big Beatles fan, Randy. So when I had a chance to do a column for the Daily Local News out here in Chester County, Pennsylvania, when newspapers were still a thing, I called it The Family Way with Dr. Jim, which is sort of an obscure Paul McCartney reference. And boy, did I love doing that column, Randy, because, at CHOP, okay, I wrote a lot, and I kind of liked that, but it was more research. It didn't touch people's lives and put me in contact with them as directly as I kind of wanted to. And so I would write about topics that people would bring up in the therapy room or that I'd hear about in my private life. So I had free reign on that. And it was a very popular column, and I loved the feedback that I got from people for good and bad. So
how long did you do that? And are you still doing that, or you've moved on to different things now?
I'm not doing that these days. I may go back to that at some point. I do kind of miss that sort of writing. I have a lot of side service work that I do that's psychology related, and that takes up a fair amount of time. So. Wow.
Okay. When I talk to you, I always like to talk to my guests the night before to make sure. First of all, you guys are going to show up, so I don't have to improvise. Because if I had to tell any jokes, or if I had to show a wind-up, that wouldn't be very good on a radio show, or how to throw a slider, or try to explain it. But I like to talk to my guests the night before, and I said, Jim, is there anything that I can ask you that that you would like me to ask you? And you thought, and you said, well, there's. As we talked, there's a few things. He said, but one thing I want you to ask me is tell me about Veggietales. So I'm asking you to tell me about Veggietales, Jim.
That's right. Okay. Well, that's a subject close to my heart. Probably a number of your listeners, if they're Christians, especially if they, have children, there's a good chance they've heard of Veggietales. But I had never heard of them before I became a parent. My daughter Anjali's godparents gave us a videotape, The Best of Veggietales, when she was a baby. And I thought, well, this is interesting. So I popped it on, and it was Veggietales is stories from the Bible and other themes, written with humor. It's animation, terrific music, very enjoyable. But I must say, I learned more. I had been to Catholic school, grade school, high school, even my undergrad was, St. Joe's. I learned more from watching those videos with my kids than, it's a little embarrassing to say. I should have known more, but better late than never. I learned so much. So anyway, my daughter's got a little bit older. I still love Veggietales, and I just Googled Phil Vischer one day. He's the creator of Veggietales. And I had learned that he no longer owned Veggietales, and he wrote a book about his experience with that and what happened with it. The book's called Me, Myself, and Bob. I know Bob the Tomato, by the way, is one of his characters. I'm mentioning this just to be clear. I don't get a dime from whoever owns Veggietales now. It's just meant a lot to me. So in that book, okay, Phil Vischer is talking about when, what got him going, his desire to serve the Lord. And it was going very well. And I can't remember all the details, but little by little, financially, etc., the company started going down the tubes. And this is where it really got fascinating for me. He talks about praying about it. He said, I'm doing God's work here. All I need is God to help me do this service. I want to sort of be like the Walt Disney of Christian videos. And then he stopped and he said, you know what, that's not for me to say. And he wrote, I don't need to do animation to serve the Lord. I don't need this. I don't need that. What I need is ... God. And that has never left me because I think I've certainly fallen prey to this, and I bet many of us have, that we think we need this or that because we're pretty sure we're doing God's work. But that's not always for us to say. At the end of the day, that's what we need to rely on, is God and God alone.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's a perfect segue into my next question, and I wanted to ask you about that because I was wondering, different things. I had Dennis Gaxiola on last week, and I was asking him how a comedian prepares to go out on the show, and how he, if he stands up in front of the audience and things start falling apart, how does he turn the audience to kind of, get back on his side and start laughing? And I always think, how is it for this person's profession? And, I know mine, but yours is kind of, I wonder, do you guys, do psychologists, do you still, like you see on TV and stuff, do you guys get in a group setting or something like that? And what do you do? And one of the big questions I had was, does spirituality and psychology interact? How does that work? Because that's got to be a little bit of a touchy subject, doesn't it? If you're a Christian and you have something, you kind of want to interject a little bit, but you're wondering if somebody's going to go, they're an atheist or something like that, and they want to say, mind your own business kind of thing. How does that work?
Oh, okay. Well, I can, mostly speak for myself. I'm not saying I'm the finest psychologist in the world, but I've gotten a lot of feedback over the years that I'm a peculiar type of psychologist. Those who have seen other psychologists will often say, not always positively, well, you're a different sort of shrink, aren't you? Okay. So, as the first question you asked, Randy, that's a little easier for me to field. Psychologists, anyone conducting therapy, it is a good idea to check in with peers from time to time. It keeps us humble, keeps us learning. I always say to somebody, if they're thinking about going to see a psychologist, ask that person, are you in therapy yourself? Have you ever been in therapy? Because there's a real risk in a profession like mine, and I know all the stereotypes. There's a risk, number one, of getting a little too nutty because you're listening to problems all the time. There's a risk of getting very pompous, too, because, my gosh, people are coming to you for advice. So I think it's essential to be able to step back, reflect on what we're doing and what matters to us in life. But now that I hear myself saying that, Randy, I think, well, gosh, that's probably good advice for all of us in any field, whether you're a pitcher or a therapist or you work at the convenience store, to be able to step back and reflect on the values. And so on my website, and I make this a guiding principle of mine, I ask about a person's, are you a person of faith? Is spirituality important in your life? I ask it in a deliberately vague or general way because I'm well aware it's extremely important in a lot of people's lives. Or I'll get replies that, well, I'm lapsed this or that, and I'd like to get back to it. And some people will say, no, it's not important to me at all. So increasingly psychologists do ask questions like that, but it's not something that in any way I was trained to do. I just thought it made sense. And I say, if something's important to you, it's important to me, and let's talk about it.
That's a great answer. I love that answer. So you can basically take it, take the session how it comes, and you have you have your beliefs, and if you can interject them, that's what you do. And so I also one day as I write my notes of different things I wanted to ask you, and then just our correspondence on writing back and forth to each other. I noticed one day that you said that you were expecting an important call from like another country. I mean, do you do service work and stuff like that, or it appeared that you do?
I do. Now it's not something I talk about a lot, but since you asked the question, I'm going to answer it. I can hear my late mother's voice in the back of my head, Randy, saying, I told you when you were a kid, just shut up and serve others. And don't talk about it, okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, for sure. Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. All right. So there's an organization, just one brief example. There's an organization on the side, so to speak. I do some service for them when there's a crisis or some natural emergency, some natural disaster, because when I got into private practice, I realized I learned through some acquaintances there wasn't really a lot of psychologists doing that kind of work. And I became aware over time that, I think I can handle that stuff. I'm not squeamish. I don't freak out. So I think I have a responsibility to serve. And it has taken me directions that I never would have guessed. And I pray more about that than maybe anything else. God, you take over here. If you've given me some talents, direct me on how to use them.
Well, God bless you for that, because I was thinking too. I'm sure a lot of the folks that are tuning in want to hear, since what you're doing this different kind of service work, different countries and stuff like that. How are people reacting to this coronavirus epidemic? And I'm sure you're hearing it already, because they're canceling sports events. People are wondering. They've been looking all year long for. I just use my baseball, the baseball season to open up, and now people that have just been really, they wrap their whole world around it, and now their world has been canceled, and there's people getting sick. That's something that you're really that's gonna keep you really busy, buddy.
It's gonna keep me really busy, and I'll tell you, that's one thing about being a psychologist in 2020 is there's plenty of work, Randy. Never going to run out of business, okay? But more specifically about the virus, yeah, we're all hearing about it all the time now, right? And it's a big concern. Since you mentioned that, Randy, it reminds me of 9/11, 2001, And I was, of course, I had already been a psychologist for quite a while. And my work, all our lives, I know, my work in particular got, shall I say, rather intense and interesting for a while. And specifically, otherwise, all my clients are, quote, normal people, okay, that are just struggling with this or that. But otherwise normal people, and we saw this all around, right? We're predicting doom and gloom, and we're really freaking out, especially with it, as we didn't know initially who did this and what the problem was. So I remember vividly, Randy, that very week, there was an 18-year-old young man in my office, and he was freaking out because he was worried, I'm going to have to go to war, etc. Now, I had already known him for a while, and I'm thinking this way again now. I put my arm around him. I said, come up to the window and look out with me. And we looked out to the trees in the parking lot. I said, let's just say for a moment, let's say that it does all go to hell, okay? You'll get up tomorrow. Well, look, if you're dead, your problems are over. But assuming you're alive, you get up, you're still going to be you. The things that matter to you are still going to matter to you. You'll take care of those around you, and you'll try to be the best person you can be. And so that, that brings me back to my point I said a few minutes ago, that if we're more or less clear on what truly matters to me in this world, then those things don't change when times are tough and times are easy. When we have some grounding, we have some basis, so we don't get blown this way or that. So if 100% of my well-being, for instance, depended upon the Philadelphia sports teams, God help me, then I'd be in horrible shape right now. Or if it depended on the stock market, totally. Now, I'm not sugarcoating what's going on. I'm not saying that it's not challenging for me either. But I'm thinking of a line from your book, Randy, that life just does not go from point A to point B in a straight line. And I circled that and I wrote, Amen, Brother Randy. It's just the way it is. It does not go in a straight line. We think we know how things are going to go, and then life is always throwing us curveballs. This one is a little more intense than the usual, right?
I love that. I love you interjecting in my book too, my friend. But you know what? After that, you did good. But after a hard day's work and stuff like that, and you've listened to everyone's issues and problems and everything else that goes with the job, when you get home, how do you kind of forget it? How do you relax? And what keeps you grounded?
Well, my spirituality, absolutely. But I have very specific routine that I've had for years. Because you're right. If, I like my work. I've been doing it a long time. But I don't always want to be Dr. Jim. Like all of us, I wear many hats, right? I'm a human being. I'm a child of God. I'm a father. I'm a husband, et cetera, et cetera. So the rule around here, Randy, is when Daddy comes home, for the first 30 minutes, nobody asks him any questions, or expects him to solve any problems. And I go in the bedroom, and I'll put on something mindless or hopefully funny. I like The Simpsons and SpongeBob, that kind of stuff, where I don't have to think. And after that period, and maybe I'll pray and meditate a bit, and after that time, okay, bring it on, family. So, you get it?
I got it.
Balance is crucial. And all my patients are different. They all have different issues. But there's one thing that I bring up with everybody, and that is, as a prerequisite to living your life these days and to being consistently happy. All right? And now, this is related to spirituality and God, but not specifically. I say that we need to keep on the radar balance, simplicity, and flexibility. And if you're feeling really out of sorts, check in with those. See if any of those need to be adjusted. So there you go. No charge for that mini therapy session.
That's that's Dr. Jim's thought for today and tomorrow. And the future. I love that. If people can think of that, okay, where am I out of balance? And it's always for me God first, and then put all your ducks in a row, and that's great advice, buddy. And so what you mentioned earlier in the show that you say, well, I don't know if I'm going to do this forever. We'll take what God gives me. But have you made, not made, but do you have any plans, God willing, in the future? Is there a life after psychology?
Well, gosh, I hope so. I hope there's a life after psychology. Yeah, I have plans. My dear father, I miss him terribly. But he was a hero to me, but to many other people, Randy, as I've mentioned to you before. He was a long-time sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous. And my family and I had the great privilege of him living with us, Dad living with us for the last decade of his life. And one of the things he used to say is, life never stops giving us lessons in humility, especially when we don't think we need them anymore. Humility, humility, humility. So about life after psychology, yeah, Cindy and I have plans, actually talking about retirement and maybe moving somewhere, a slightly warmer climate. But we're, at this point in life, we've trained ourselves to make plans with the understanding that we can make all the plans we want. And if it's not meant to be, okay, we will adjust and go with what life and God presents us.
Well, I think that's a great way to look at it. Just my wife Maria always.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Dave.
I've been scaling back some professional activities, but ex-major leaguers keep asking me to be on podcasts, so I have to go with that too. That's what God wants me to do.
Well, I'm sure glad I did. I mean, this show, I have so much more that we need to talk about. I was wondering, we're running out of time now, but I was wondering if you would come on again so we can, we can do another version and another half of this, because we haven't even started to cover everything I'd like to ask you. Would you come on again, my friend?
Absolutely, Randy. I would love that. I'd like that very much, and thank you for asking.
You're welcome. I look forward to a great relationship, and Jim, one of the funny parts about it is, I told Maria I got to watch what I say to you, because I hope you're not analyzing me when I'm talking to you.
I hear that a lot. I'll either hear you analyzing me, or this one used to make me cringe. Someone will find out I'm a psychologist, like at a party, and they'll say, "Boy, do I have a case for you," and they'll start telling me about some relatives. So I don't know how lawyers feel.
They don't tell you about themselves, but I just want to thank you, Jim, for being here today, my friend, and please come again.
Thanks, Randy. God bless you. Thanks again, man.
We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
I want to thank everyone for listening today to God's Miracle, and thanks to my special guest, Jim Karustis, for being here today. You've been listening to the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. This is Randy Lerch saying bye-bye.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.